A man in a wrinkled shirt sat alone on the executive floor of a glass tower in Charlotte, North Carolina. 4 hours. No one offered him coffee. No one asked his name. At his feet sat a cracked leather briefcase covered in star stickers and a child's crayon drawing peeking out the side pocket. Then the elevator doors opened. A woman in a sharp navy blazer stepped out, exhausted from a board meeting that had nearly ended her career. She looked at him the way you'd look at a stain on a white carpet. "Who let this man sit here?" she snapped. "This is the executive floor, not a daycare waiting room." Her assistant leaned in and whispered 4 words. Her face went pale. The man she had just humiliated in front of the entire lobby was holding the one document that could save her company from collapse and decide whether she kept her job at all. But what happened next? Nobody expected. 3 days earlier, in a quiet apartment on the outskirts of Asheville, Marcus Hale stood at his kitchen counter, spreading peanut butter across 2 slices of bread. The apartment was small but tidy. A couch with a patched cushion, a bookshelf made of cinder blocks, and on the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a ladybug, a crayon drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands under a sky full of orange stars. His daughter, Lily, came down the hallway in mismatched socks, her backpack nearly as big as she was. 7 years old, missing her front tooth, hair sticking up on one side from sleep. "Daddy, can I put another sticker on your bag?" She was already holding a gold star. Marcus looked at the old leather briefcase leaning against the wall, cracked along the handle, covered in stickers from months of this same morning ritual. He nodded. Lily pressed the star onto the flap and smoothed it down with her thumb. "So you remember me when you go to work?" He said nothing. He just smoothed her hair. He drove her to school in a pickup truck with worn-out brakes, watched her disappear through the front doors, then drove to a warehouse on the edge of town, where he spent 9 hours repairing industrial generators. He made $18 an hour. His hands were calloused. His boots were steel-toed. And no one he worked beside had any idea that 4 years ago, he had been the lead structural engineer for the largest renewable energy expansion project in the southeastern United States. A man whose name had once been spoken with reverence in rooms filled with senators and CEOs. That life ended the day his wife, Diane, died of a brain aneurysm. No warning, no goodbye. One morning she was making coffee, and by that evening, Marcus was a widower with a 3-year-old daughter and a stack of medical bills that didn't make sense because there had been no illness to fight. Just an ambulance, a hospital, and silence. He resigned without explanation, packed 2 suitcases and Lily's toys, and drove from Charlotte to Asheville, where Diane had grown up. He found a cheap apartment, found work that kept his hands busy, and never looked back. But the past doesn't always stay buried. That afternoon, while Marcus waited outside the school for Lily, his phone rang. A name he hadn't seen in 3 years lit up the screen. His former supervisor from the Federal Energy Commission. "I know you don't want to hear from me," the man said, "but I need you to listen." The Energy Commission had approved a $640 million contract for a regional power grid expansion. The lead company, Hartwell Energy Group out of Charlotte, had cleared every requirement except one. The technical blueprint had been rejected. 12 critical structural flaws, 10 days to fix them, or the contract would be handed to their biggest rival. "Your original framework is still the gold standard," the man said. "Nobody's come close in 4 years. I'm sending a letter of introduction, but you'll have to go to them yourself." Marcus watched Lily run out of the school, backpack bouncing, waving through the windshield. "The consulting fee would clear everything you owe," the man added quietly. "All of it." Marcus said nothing for a long moment. "Be careful with the people inside that building," the man said, his voice dropping. "Someone wants this contract to fail." Hartwell Energy Group occupied a 40-story glass tower downtown. The lobby was white marble and steel, with a security desk staffed by men in dark blazers. Marcus walked in wearing the same khakis, a pressed shirt, and that sticker-covered briefcase. He carried a sealed federal envelope and a letter of introduction. The receptionist looked him over, scuffed shoes, a crayon drawing poking out of his bag. "Can I help you, sir? I have correspondence from the Federal Energy Commission for your executive team. I was asked to deliver it in person." She dialed the 40th floor. The call was answered by Trent Calloway, Hartwell's chief operating officer, lean, gray-haired, in a suit that cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. When the receptionist read the name aloud, Trent's expression didn't change, but his eyes did. A flicker. Gone in an instant. He knew exactly who Marcus Hale was, and he knew exactly what would happen if that man set foot near the engineering department. "There's no appointment on the schedule," Trent said smoothly. "Tell him to wait." Marcus sat down. 1 hour passed. Then 2 employees in tailored suits crossed the lobby, glancing at the man in the wrinkled shirt with a child's toy peeking from his bag. One leaned toward the other and whispered, "I think the repairman got off on the wrong floor." They laughed. Marcus didn't react. He sat with his hands folded, occasionally glancing at the crayon drawing, 2 figures under an orange sky, then looking away. 40 floors above, Diane, no, Vanessa Pierce was fighting for her career. The boardroom was long and cold, glass walls reflecting every face. The $640 million contract, the centerpiece of Hartwell's 5-year strategy, had been rejected. 12 errors. 10 days. Or it would go to their largest competitor. "If this isn't fixed, Vanessa," the chairman said, removing his glasses, "the board will consider a change in leadership." "I understand," she said, her voice level, her jaw tight. Trent leaned toward her with practiced concern. "I'll handle everything. Don't worry." By the time Vanessa stepped out of the elevator nearly 4 hours later, her mood was a blade looking for something to cut, and Marcus was still sitting in the lobby. Vanessa pulled her sunglasses down and pointed at him. "Who let this man sit here? This is the executive floor, not a daycare waiting room." The receptionist straightened. "He says he has a letter from—" "If the Federal Energy Commission sends someone," Vanessa cut her off, "they call ahead. They send someone in a suit with an appointment. They don't send a man carrying a child's drawing to the 40th floor of a publicly traded company." A few employees near the coffee station laughed quietly. Trent appeared at her shoulder, hands in his pockets, voice casual. "I'll call security to escort him out." Marcus stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He opened his briefcase, took out the thick envelope bearing the federal seal, and placed it on the reception desk. Then he closed his briefcase, adjusted the strap, and walked toward the elevator. He walked like a man who had already decided what would happen next, and none of it depended on anyone in this lobby. Vanessa's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Renee, who had been with the company 11 years, picked up the envelope. She opened it, scanned the first page, turned to the second, and her face changed. Surprise, recognition, alarm. She leaned close to Vanessa's ear and whispered 3 sentences. Vanessa froze in the middle of her own lobby. "Wait, is that him?" Marcus had already reached the elevator. The doors opened. He didn't look back. Behind Vanessa, Trent's expression shifted, a flicker of satisfaction, gone in less than a second. He did not want Marcus Hale in this building 1 more minute. Vanessa caught the elevator door with her hand, just as it began to close. Marcus looked at her, not with anger, not with hurt, but with the steady patience of a man who had been underestimated too many times to be surprised by it. "Mr. Hale," she said, her voice cracking with urgency beneath the arrogance, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Give me 10 minutes. Marcus held her gaze. 4 hours ago, he said quietly, I only needed 10 minutes of yours. The silence between them lasted 3 full seconds. Somewhere on another floor, a phone rang. Then he stepped out and followed her down the hall. She led him to a small glass-walled conference room. Trent followed 3 steps behind, already objecting. "We can't give an outsider access to proprietary technical data. This is a security risk." Vanessa didn't slow down. "Sit down, Trent." Hartwell's head of engineering, a precise woman named Diane Foster, exhausted from 6 sleepless nights, pulled the rejected blueprint up on the screen and walked through the 12 flagged errors, her voice thin with frustration. Marcus sat across the table and listened. He didn't speak for 5 minutes. His eyes moved across the screen, the way a surgeon's eyes move across an X-ray, not guessing, but reading something he already understood at a level no one else in the room would reach. Then he stood, walked to the whiteboard, and began to draw from memory. No notes, no laptop, junction points, load pathways, relay sequences, failover systems, clean, precise lines covering half the board in under 3 minutes. He circled 4 nodes in red and explained, in a voice so quiet everyone leaned forward, the cascading failure that connected them. Error 1 causes a voltage imbalance here. Error 2 creates a feedback loop in the relay sequence. Errors 3 and 4 amplify the instability until the entire regional grid would overload within 72 hours of activation. The room went silent. Diane Foster stared at the board, then at Marcus. Her hands trembled against the table edge. She had spent 6 years building this system. In 3 minutes, a man in a wrinkled shirt had seen deeper into it than she ever had. Marcus capped the marker. "These 4 are genuine design flaws," he said quietly. "But the other 8 are not mistakes." He paused. "They were put there." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "What do you mean, put there?" Vanessa leaned forward. "I need to see the revision logs for this blueprint," Marcus said. "Every edit in the last 3 months. Every user who accessed the core files. Every timestamp." Trent's voice came fast and sharp. "That's classified internal data. He has no contract, no clearance, no authority to request access to our systems." Vanessa looked at Marcus. She looked at Trent. She looked at the whiteboard, where 4 errors were circled in red, and the rest of the architecture gleamed like the skeleton of something enormous. "I won't give you the logs," she said finally, "but I'll grant you 24-hour access to the current files. You can work from those." Marcus nodded once, picked up his briefcase, and left without another word. That night, after Lily fell asleep on the couch with a coloring book on her chest, Marcus carried her to bed, pulled the blanket to her chin, and sat down with his laptop. By 2 in the morning, he'd found the pattern. The 8 remaining errors weren't random. They were surgical, each inserted into a node requiring executive-level clearance, subtle, enough to pass a routine review, but catastrophic enough to guarantee federal rejection. Modified over 6 weeks, always between midnight and 4 in the morning. Someone with Trent Calloway's access had sabotaged this blueprint on purpose, and whoever did it understood the system almost as well as Marcus did. At that same hour, in a high-rise apartment overlooking the skyline, Trent sat with a glass of bourbon and a prepaid phone. He dialed a number tied to a shell company, a subsidiary of Solace Grid Corporation, Hartwell's biggest rival. "He's digging," Trent said. "We need to push him out before he connects the dots." The next morning, Marcus's access card flashed red at the elevator bank. Trent had deactivated his credentials at 6 a.m., 4 hours before anyone else arrived. A security guard stepped forward. "Sir, your access has been revoked." Marcus stood still, calculating. He had the pattern, but not the proof. He needed the raw server logs, the unedited history that would show exactly who had modified each node and when. That's when Diane Foster walked through the front doors, coffee in one hand, tablet in the other. She saw him standing by the elevators, the guard beside him, the red light blinking. She understood instantly. She looked at the guard. She looked at Marcus. She looked at her own badge, and hesitated exactly 3 seconds, weighing her career, her pension, her mortgage, against the thing she'd felt in that conference room the day before. She swiped her badge. The light turned green. "Come with me," she said quietly. She took him to the server room on the 38th floor, climate-controlled, restricted access, racks of drives with blinking lights. "I've known something was off for months," she said. "Versions that didn't match. Changes I didn't remember making. I just didn't have the skill to trace it." Marcus pulled the raw edit logs. What he found was unambiguous. 8 unauthorized modifications, all executed under Trent Calloway's login, all between 1 and 3 in the morning, on dates when building security recorded no other executive on the premises. He copied everything onto 2 encrypted drives and slipped one into his shirt pocket. As they stepped out, Trent appeared at the end of the hallway, phone to his ear. His eyes narrowed when he saw Diane coming out of the restricted corridor. He said nothing, but within 40 minutes, he'd called an emergency meeting with Vanessa. "Marcus Hale accessed restricted systems without authorization," Trent said, voice tight with manufactured outrage. "He has no contract, no NDA, no clearance, and I have reason to believe he has prior connections to Solace Grid." He slid a forged email across the table, showing a fabricated exchange between Marcus and a Solace executive. Vanessa studied the email. She studied Trent, the tension in his jaw, the steadiness of his hands, his eyes fixed on her without blinking. Something about his composure felt like a wall built too quickly to hide what was behind it. But she'd known Trent for 5 years. She suspended Marcus's access and ordered him brought to the main conference room. The room filled, Vanessa at the head of the table, Trent beside her, his fabricated evidence in a neat stack, Diane near the window, pale. 2 board members called in as witnesses. Marcus walked in last and sat down. The USB drive was in his breast pocket, close to his heart. Trent presented his case with rehearsed fluency. Unauthorized server access. No formal agreement. A suspicious email. The profile of a corporate spy exploiting a crisis for competitive gain. He should be removed from the premises immediately and permanently. Vanessa turned to Marcus. Do you have anything to say? Marcus didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He reached into his briefcase. The old leather bag with the star stickers, the butterfly, the small drawing, and pulled out a large sheet of drafting paper, yellowed at the edges, soft from years of folding. He unfolded it on the table. It was a hand-drawn schematic of the entire grid architecture. Every junction, every pathway, rendered in mechanical pencil, with the precision of a man who understood not just what the system did, but why it existed. In the corner, a signature, Marcus T. Hale. Beside it, a federal certification stamp, dated 4 years earlier. The blueprint your company is building from, Marcus said quietly. I drew it 4 years ago, 2 weeks before my wife passed away. No one spoke. No one moved. Vanessa looked at the schematic, then the signature. The same name on the federal letter. The same name the receptionist had called up to the 40th floor. The same name Trent had told her to ignore. For the first time, she didn't see a repairman or an intruder. She saw the person who had created the foundation her entire company was built on. Trent recovered quickly. An old drawing doesn't prove anything about what he's doing now. Marcus turned and looked at him. The first time he's able. Looked directly at the man since entering the room. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The look carried the weight of 4 years of silence, and the quiet authority of a man who knew exactly what he'd built, and exactly what had been done to it. Trent's jaw tightened. He swallowed. Marcus folded the schematic away and addressed Vanessa. I'll correct all 12 errors within 48 hours, but I have one condition. He laid it out. Full access to the complete revision logs, and a final technical review conducted in the presence of an official federal representative. Trent's response was immediate and uncontrolled. The first crack in his composure since Marcus had walked in. That is an outrageous demand. There is absolutely no precedent. Vanessa wasn't looking at his face. She was looking at his hands, gripping the glass table so tightly the tendons stood out white as bone. She had never once seen his hands shake. Granted, she said. Over the next 36 hours, Marcus worked without pause in the engineering lab. Diane beside him running simulations under his direction. He repaired the 4 genuine flaws first, then turned to the 8 sabotaged nodes, extracting full audit trails, every login, every timestamp, every credential, all pointing back to Trent Calloway. He found something else too. 3 classified technical files had been transmitted from Trent's A's corporate email to a personal address routed through an encrypted relay, a relay that hadn't quite erased its own metadata. The destination traced back to a holding company owned by Solace Grid Corporation. Trent made one final call from the parking garage of his apartment building. Delete everything. Every file, every record. Do it now. But Marcus had already made copies. At 6 that morning, he'd sent a secured file to the Federal Commission with a single line. Tomorrow, 9A Regard. M. Hartwell Main Conference Room. Bring counsel. The next morning, in the main conference room, on the 45th floor, morning light laid white rectangles across the glass table, the same kind of light that had once fallen across a lobby where a man sat for 4 hours with a briefcase covered in stars. Marcus walked through all 12 corrections. The federal liaison confirmed the corrected design met every specification required for approval. Then Marcus changed the slide. Edit logs. Timestamps in bold. Login credentials highlighted in red. Building security records confirming Trent Calloway's S badge in the building during every sabotage window. Below that, the email metadata. 3 files, 3 transmissions, all tracing to Solace Grid. The room went still. Those 8 errors weren't engineering mistakes, Marcus said quietly. They were written by hand, from your account, at 2 in the morning, on nights when everyone else was asleep. You didn't make mistakes, Mr. Calloway. You sold them. Trent stood, face the color of old paper. This is fabricated. The federal liaison placed a document on the table. Formal notice of federal investigation. Trent looked around the room. Not one person would meet his eyes. He sat back down slowly, hands trembling on the glass. Vanessa stood. She looked at Marcus for a long, unbroken moment. She didn't say thank you. She didn't apologize. She gave one slow, deep nod, the kind of acknowledgement that exists beyond language. Within the hour, the board confirmed the contract was preserved. Vanessa retained her position. Trent was terminated and escorted out. Federal investigators waiting to make contact. As the room emptied, Vanessa followed Marcus into the hallway. 4 hours in that lobby, she said behind him. I owe you an apology. Marcus stopped walking. He didn't turn around. Then he pressed the elevator button and waited for the doors to open. 2 weeks later, in Asheville, afternoon light came through the kitchen window in a low golden stripe. Marcus stood outside Lily's school, hands in his pockets. When she came running out, she carried a large rolled-up drawing held with a rubber band, her face glowing with pride. I made something, she said, climbing into the truck. At home, she unrolled it on the kitchen table, her most detailed drawing yet. A tall figure in a blue shirt stood in front of a giant glass building. On his bag, a gold star. Behind the glass, smaller figures watched. The sky was orange, filled with stars of every size. My teacher asked what you do for work, Lily said. I told her you fix electricity. She paused, looking up at him. But I think you fix more than that. Marcus smiled, the rare, unguarded kind. The kind that only appeared when Lily said something that reached past everything he's built around himself. That evening, a package arrived. Inside, a formal consulting agreement from Hartwell Energy Group, signed by Vanessa Pierce. The compensation was enough to clear every remaining dollar of medical debt that had followed Marcus from Charlotte. Beneath the contract, a small cream envelope. Inside, a handwritten note. I will never let anyone sit waiting for 4 hours again. V.P. Marcus set it down beside Lily's, as drawing, and looked out at the last light fading behind the ridgeline. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he'd saved but never used. Vanessa Pierce. Phase 2 begins next month. I need a chief architect. You can bring your daughter. We just started a daycare program. He read it. He looked at Lily on the floor, surrounded by crayons, the evening light turning her hair the same gold as the sticker she'd just pressed onto the envelope. He didn't reply, but he didn't delete the message either. Sometimes the thing that changes everything doesn't knock. It just sits quietly in the lobby, waiting to be noticed.